Okay, we're live. All right. This is good evening. This is Deacon Joseph Swaden.
Hieromonk, Enoch.
Right. And this is Orthodox Apologetics Live, where we talk apologetics and answer questions in the chat and answer heterodox of all stripes. Kind of a recap show today we're doing because we dealt with a couple of different people yesterday, and then we dealt with a few different items. So we're just kind of catching up on that. So in the first place, as for updates on whether or not the Diamond brothers have contacted us back, they have not. I've emailed, I've called. I will now call to verify that my email was received, and then hopefully we'll see if they do anything, which my guess is they won't, but the most we're going to probably get is a follower of the Diamond brothers as we've received so far. Let me think here. Any comments on yesterday's show, Father?
I think we probably could have cut down on how long we were doing it because it got to a point where it was just repeating the same thing in a circular. He was going to a circular argument. We could have just said, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think what we need to do is we need to introduce a rule, basically, that if we start seeing a circular argument, we're just going to shut it down. We're not gonna entertain it for, what was it, something in the range of an hour and a half yesterday. That was ridiculous. Basically, if you have an argument, we show you it's circular, and you repeat yourself, we're going to end the conversation politely and and kindly, but we're not going to let our time be monopolized by a circular argument / advertisement, especially for people who are basically probably afraid to debate us to begin with. And so, in any case, yeah, that's basically what it's going to come down to, Sebastian. We will shut it down if it gets to that level again. Outside of that, I don't, I think that it was kind of ridiculous because you get to a certain point where if a person keeps saying the fathers say this and we know that they didn't, you have to just say, okay, look, you're going to have to prove it by citing fathers or not. And that's not just, referring to a website or something like that. You've got to do better than that. That's not apologetics. That's advertising for some other guy. And, frankly, I just feel like the whole Diamond Brothers thing is, I don't know. I think maybe they're kind of a cult. It kind of reminds me of the Gregory Colorado stuff, except, papist style.
And I apologize. I was kind of getting a little heated at some points and making little I was kind of, I don't know if I should.
I thought that was entertaining.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I should really be. I don't know.
I think part of the problem is being too good-natured in apologetics is why we ended up staying for 2 hours, literally saying the same things over and over. I don't think that it's an issue of niceness. I think it's an issue of just being direct and being honest. And if you're being direct and honest, the truth is we should have shut that down ages ago.
Okay.
I mean, so you weren't being too mean or anything like that. It's nothing of the sort.
All right. I'm sorry, I'm coming down with this cold and a sore throat, so.
Yeah. That's probably due to, just talking for a very long time. Okay, this is probably a basic question, but what happens to Sebastian asks, this is probably a basic question, but what happens to an infant that is not baptized? Considering that Father Enoch mentioned imputed guilt, that's a controversial topic.
Well, there's this whole discussion among people who study St. Augustine about whether he actually taught imputed guilt, personal imputed guilt. And it seems to be, I mean, I'm going to break a rule here and say there actually are secondary source articles that quote St. Augustine a whole lot and other fathers and talk about this issue that are actually pretty good about it. Needless to say, as far as I understand, the position of the church, based upon the readings in the Synaxarion for Meat Fair Saturday, mimic what St. Gregory Nazianzen says, I think in like Oration 40 or Oration 39, I can't remember the name of it, which is that infants who die unbaptized are neither rewarded nor condemned. And that's what it says in the reading, the Synaxarian reading for Meat Fair Saturday in the Byzantine Rite. So it's kind of implied that they go to kind of the upper levels of Hades. And people hear the word Hades, they assume it's like the hell of the damned, the people, being burned in a pit. But if you look at some synods, for example, there's something like the 1722 Synod of Constantinople, it talks about this, that there are different abodes in Hades. So from what I understand, reading the Fathers and taking that Synaxarian reading at its face value, an unbaptized infant soul goes to the upper level of Hades, which is in fact in Latin would be called limbus. Limbo is technically not. I know that's kind of a term used by Roman Catholics, or at least used to be, but it's technically not supposed to be a different state. I mean, like, there's only two states. So there's the Hades and there's the heavenly kingdom, paradise. So that's what I actually wrote an article about this on NFTU a few years ago, and I'm going to post it in the links. I mean, right here in the comments, so people can read it. The whole imputed guilt question again. St. Augustine, when he had his, what is true is I think when he had his later debates with like Julian of Eclanum in the last few years of his life, there is a belief that he did imply some sort of a guilt more than just kind of this abstract guilt of nature. All right, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But there's really, if you look at writers like St. Prosper of Aquitaine and a few others who were his disciples, they never really seem to follow that, because when you're debating heretics, the problem is you can often use phrases that you may later regret, or that mean something in one context but don't mean it in the other. So the whole imputed guilt, I'm not really prepared for that, other than to say that that as far as I can tell from the Fathers, there is no belief, church belief, in a dogma of an imputed personal guilt. All right. Saint Cyril of Alexandria, he mentioned something about this, and in his homily on the gospel on Romans, Saint Cyril of Alexandria says, "What has Adam's guilt got to do with us? Why are we held responsible for his sin when we were not born, even born when he committed it? Did not God say the parents will not die for the children, nor the children for the parents, but the soul which has sinned, it shall die? How then shall we defend this doctrine? The soul, I say, which has sinned, it shall die. We have become sinners because of Adam's disobedience in the following manner. After he fell into sin and surrendered to corruption, impure lusts invaded the nature of his flesh. And at the same time, the evil law of our members was born. For our nature contracted the disease of sin because of the disobedience of one man, that is Adam, and thus many became sinners. This was not because they sinned along with Adam, because they did not then exist, but because they had the same nature as Adam, which fell under the law of sin. Thus, just as human nature acquired the weakness of corruption in Adam because of disobedience, and evil desires invaded it, so the same nature was later set free by Christ. It was obedient to God the Father and did not commit sin." So it seems to me St. Cyril of Alexandria is proposing some interpretation of guilt. Though it doesn't seem like it means like a personal guilt. It's almost more like a kind of an abstract sense of
inherited guilt.
Yeah. Well, see, the problem is this. I think the words used in Latin for inherited guilt are like reatus and reata. I think, or reus. And again, there's a whole discussion about those can mean something. Those really mean more like a charge or an accusation. Like St. Paul says, I think in Ephesians, that we're born children of wrath. All right. So I don't really have much more to say. It's really, I think it's actually a complicated subject. The councils do teach ancestral/original sin. I don't really think there's a difference. You need to read the canons of 120 to 127, I would say, of the Council of Carthage. And they give what you might call the definitive doctrine on it. Everything else would be kind of more in the realm of kind of a theory. For example, you have many church writers. Pope St. Gregory the Great in the 590s talked about how many fathers have discussions about the origin of the soul. All right. Now, there is one view of the origin of soul which is completely ruled out. That is pre-existence of the soul. That's Origenist's view. All right. But St. Gregory says that some fathers propose that at conception, God creates a new soul then out of nothing. And others propose, I don't know, some people would call it traducianism, that the soul is somehow, I'm very careful about this, it's somehow a combination broken off in some sense from the father and the mother. I'd have to get the exact text from St. Gregory. I don't really have it before me. It's in one of his letters. St. Gregory says he doesn't know. He doesn't know the solution because he sees problems in both answers about the origin of the soul. And he just proposes that it's a mystery that we're not really meant to understand. So there is original sin or ancestral sin, and it is in some way carried on because it's St. Cyprian of Carthage in the Council of Carthage in the 250s explicitly says we're baptized for the remission of sin, especially the sin we inherited from Adam. All right. So now I'm just saying that's basically taught there. Now, when I've confronted people who are kind of Hackna or Romanidians with some of this stuff,
that's what actually that comes right up to Gregory Thaumaturgus'
yeah.
question.
Okay, so what happens is now you can read Canons 120 to 127 of Carthage 418-19 and the words of St. Cyprian and not derive an inherited personal guilt concept. All right, I mean, there is some usage of the term guilt, but Romanidians and kind of so-called right-wing renovationists, I don't like using those political terms, but they will simply not accept these canons. In fact, I confronted one very famous priest who used to be part of Hackna. He may be dead now. I'm not going to say anything about it. But anyway, I confronted him with this, and he basically said he doesn't care what the canons and the Pedalians say. That Council of Carthage is heretical, and he doesn't care that Trullo accepted it. He doesn't care that the Seventh Council accepted it. And he then began to attack St. John Maximovich as a heretic and blah blah blah. I basically shut him down at that point. So. That's kind of a trend, it seems, Father Joseph. You have a lot of people who come to the conclusion that all the fathers, they know better than what all the fathers have taught about something. And that seems to be not just something you find in these weird pseudo-Orthodox groups, whether they claim to be conservative or they claim to be liberal, all right? But it's also the same delusion that you find in papism, I would say.
Yeah, and it's that even whether it's most extreme forms or not, that it is absolutely the same. And it comes back to a denial, a desire to just not accept what the fathers are saying, no matter whether or not they're difficult.
For example, when sometimes I've confronted people with what Saint Photius the Great says in his work, I think is Mystagogy, he says it, where people say to him, St. Augustine taught this and this about the Filioque. And St. Photius says, well, one, I'm not sure if those aren't corrupted manuscripts, because, they were giving St. Photius corrupted texts, to try to prove the Filioque. But St. Photius says, if St. Augustine did say that, which he wasn't sure of, he would still be a saint. He would just be a saint, but he would be mistaken about these points because it wasn't heavily discussed in that area, et cetera, et cetera. And when I've posited the words of St. Photius to some of these people, they simply say St. Photius was not critically thinking, and he was too enthralled to the tradition of venerating St. Augustine. He could not challenge him. Could not challenge that tradition. And so it creates this bizarre scenario where the ecumenical councils and the fathers, when they talk about St. Augustine, just simply, according to some individuals, have no idea what they're talking about. That's just a problem, to say the least. It's
in the middle of this discussion, we're having a back and forth on the war room war zone with folks of the Monophysite or Miaphysite persuasion. And Father, you've been a bit more involved in this discussion than I have. I simply invited him to the show a minute ago, but he basically said he wouldn't do that without permission from a spiritual father, and asking if one of their priests could go on instead, and that we wouldn't attack them as heretics or something.
Well, but that's the point. It's whether they are or not, isn't that?
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of apologetics is you're defending the faith against those who don't share it. It would be kind of strange to then say, well, yeah, you're okay. We don't do that with anyone, because that would literally.
Well, I mean, would they seem to object to the term Monophysite or Miaphysite? Do they object to the term Severian?
Well, no, they don't object to the term Miaphysite, I don't think.
Oh, okay.
But they object to the fact that it's, functionally not that different from Monophysite, and then they try to say that there are two natures, but there's really one nature. It's a blended nature, and You know,
Well,
it's
one individual posted something by a book by this one Armenian, I think it was an Armenian priest or a Syro-Jacobite priest.
Mhm.
And in the book, he tries to present, everybody kind of believed the same thing. But then at the end, the conclusion review is something like, but he still attacks Chalcedon as dangerous for the church, and that's why it shouldn't be accepted. So they just recapitulate their original view, in essence.
right.
They expect us to remove
They
all of our
expect
anathema.
us to start getting soft on it, and then they can say, okay, so now you agree that Chalcedon is wrong. No, that's not how it
Now,
works.
in fact, I think St. Maximus the Confessor or St. Sophronius of Jerusalem made the comment that when Monophysitism was instituted, there was a massive joining of Coptic Severians to the Greek Patriarchate of Alexandria. And they said, because you've admitted one will, it doesn't matter what you say about Chalcedon or not, we've won. All right? And so, I mean, to me, these are kind of important questions. If someone's asking us to remove anathemas that have been on the books for 1,500 years,
There has to be a reason why.
Yeah, there has to be you have to give someone the courtesy of actually discussing something like this. I mean, I can debate, we can be friendly, but there has to be something about that, and if you're not willing to do that, I mean, I don't know, you just can't do anything. And anyway, we'll see what happens. I mean, I have no personal animosity against any of these people. I mean, I've known Coptic people. They're nice.
Well, hello? Oh, okay, sorry. It just sounded like your mic went weird, Father.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay. Divine Ages to Copts don't consider themselves Monophysite. They don't accept that term. Well, of course they don't.
Well, that's the debate. That's what we're trying to debate.
Right. We'd love to have them on the show because from a practical standpoint, whether you say Miaphysite or Monophysite, you've moved it from fully condemned territorial ground to iffy, most likely condemned territorial ground.
And it's similar to the whole Nestorian. Nestorians will say, we're Assyrians, we're not Nestorians, don't call us Nestorians. But you do know the Coptic Pope Shenouda consistently condemned the Assyrians, would have nothing to do with them. But he didn't grant them the same courtesy that the Copts demand we grant them. And the question is, why is that? So
well, again, it all comes back to
it's a special pleading type of argument.
Well, it's a special pleading. It's based upon these agreed statements that nobody really follows anymore, that were made by committees. That they're trying to kind of keep the sort of these, I guess, capitulations going. Okay, Divine Ages 2. Copts don't consider themselves Monophysite. They don't accept that term. Miaphysite is not iffy. It's not effy. It's Orthodox. No, it's not. The Miaphysite, if the Miaphysites were Orthodox, they would accept Chalcedon. In fact, this is one of the things that we have been debating for the past, I don't know, what is it now, a week and a half? Where basically they say, oh, well, we accept everything in Chalcedon, but we don't accept Chalcedon. Well, why? The whole point is when you start getting those questions, then all of a sudden another Miaphysite will pop out and go, we don't accept Chalcedon at all. No, there's only one nature. Yeah. And so the point is, you can't get a straight answer out.
Sorry, go ahead.
And when you look at what's on the books is the exact same thing that the church fathers were condemning. I mean, this is not, you don't have a 1,500-year-old misunderstanding. St. John of Damascus knew who the Miaphysites were, and he knew what was wrong with them, and so on and so forth. The idea that there's this, that we just have this, nobody had a clue until, basically,
he says we don't accept Chalcedon. Exactly, that's the problem.
Okay, well, that's exactly my point. If you don't accept Chalcedon, we don't consider you part of the Orthodox Church, because all the saints and so on and so forth.
Now they should remember that the old churches of old Rome and churches of Constantinople in the mid-6th century held several debates in Constantinople, and we held the Fifth Ecumenical Council and caused massive controversy in our own church trying to find a way to explain Chalcedon to them so they would accept it. I mean, that and in the end they didn't care. It didn't matter. So it's not like the Orthodox Church is actually, we've been over backwards time after again. See, I'm not very smart. They can defeat me if they really try, right? Huh?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. I'm just average. It just seems like I'm smart because I read a lot. But we reject We rejected because it uses heretical language, made the 3 chapters Nestorian works orthodox, and restated the 3 heretics back into church, and Pope Leo accepting harboring Nestorians. In other words, you're accusing it of being heretical, and you're accusing us for because we accept those things
as being heretical.
We accept Pope Saint Leo, and So in other words, okay, now this is an honest discussion. They're actually saying that Chalcedon is back. All right, so, but they don't say it on the forum too much unless they're pressed to it. So there's. No, the Fifth Ecumenical Council does not condemn more Chalcedon.
Do you want Divine Ages 2? If you'd like, we can have you on the show. Would you like to come on? We can send you a link. I mean, it'd be a lot braver than most of the people that are on the Facebook page there because they don't seem to want to do it.
Yes, not.
Okay, well, if he changes his mind, just let us know. And, no, the Fifth Council didn't condemn Chalcedon. How is one Orthodox and one Council and a heretic in the following? They're not. Okay. If you change your mind, Divine Aegis, feel free. We'll have you on. Sean Ridlin asks, can you all say something about pan-Orthodox? Is it like Catholic, a term with 2 meanings? Or is it a fake British religion that tried to unify British subjects in India, Iraq, and Egypt?
I don't know what he's talking about.
Well, no idea. Pan-Orthodox just means all Orthodox. It's like a pan-Orthodox assembly, supposedly, would have all the Orthodox in the area. So, like, whenever you have, a global synaxis, it's usually referred to as pan-Orthodox. So the pan-Orthodox councils of, say, the 1600s had representation from throughout the Orthodox Church.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the Fifth Council condemned the Divine Ages 2. Fifth Council condemned the three chapters, and the 3 Nestorians with the Copts which the Copts reject.
Well, first off, they did condemn the person and writing of Theodore of Mopsuestia, but Theodore of Mopsuestia was not endorsed at Chalcedon. All right, they condemned certain writings of Blessed Theodoret. But Blessed Theodoret had to renounce those writings for be received back at Chalcedon to begin with. All right, and the issue with the letter of Ibis the Persian. Hold on, let me find the decree on that. Anathematizations, capitula of the council. Okay. All right. Defense. Hey, Father, talk while I'm looking for something if you want to.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm just looking here what Divine Ages 2 is saying, but Chalcedon accepted it. He was an Nestorian. And Sean Ridlin said, I'm seeing ecumenists use pan-Orthodox to mean Nestorians, Copts, and Eastern Orthodoxy in communion. Yeah, no, that's not a legitimate meaning of pan-Orthodox because we would argue that Nestorians and Copts are not actually part of the Orthodox Church. So using pan-Orthodox in that way, and it's not usually used in that sense. It's much more commonly used, like as David Shields wrote, pan-Orthodox means jurisdictions working together. Like during Lent, a lot of groups of different jurisdictions will often meet together for certain things. That's more common use of the term, but you can't say pan-Orthodox to mean everyone who calls themselves Orthodox, because then we're leaving out the Orthodox Presbyterians. The point is, just using the word Orthodox in your name does not mean you're Orthodox. As well as the Syro-Malabar. Well, the Syro, again, yeah. They can, I don't know if they I remember they used to have some Oriental Orthodox communion or something. I don't know if they still do. Greetings, Autismus. And so basically, what's it called? No, I would not. If that's how they're using it, then that would be a heretical way of using it. I'd be very suspect of such a use. Pan-Orthodox is not that. It doesn't extend past the boundaries of the Orthodox Church.
Now, Ibis the Persian, he had some of the writings he wrote condemned. His person was never condemned. Let me see. Ibis reconciled with Kirill, and during the Fourth Council, Chalcedon, he anathematized Nestorius both orally and in writing. The fathers of the council then rehabilitated him, declaring him Orthodox. Okay. That was the whole 3 chapters controversy that later happened in parts of North Africa. Okay. So are you saying the Council of Chalcedon endorsed the letter of Ibis the Persian?
That's a question for you, Divine Aegis. And we still, have no problem if you want to come on. We'll have you on.
All right. Any other follow-up?
No, there's some discussion about what is pan-Orthodox, but we've if they're using it in that way, Sean, that's a heretical usage. I'd stay away from any such gathering. No, again, pan-Orthodox is more along the lines of all Orthodox. I realize that pan-Arabism is a kind of national unifying concept, but the point is pan-Orthodox in the normal sense, because the councils of the 16th century were called pan-Orthodox councils. There's nothing wrong with using the term pan-Orthodox. It's using the term pan-Orthodox when you throw in heretics and then say, oh, they're Orthodox too. You can't do that. Let's see here. Okay, so we've covered the whole false arguments with the Diamond Brothers. I'm not seeing a response from Divine Aegis, so we are inviting the Miaphysites on if they'd like to. So far, we've had no volunteers. Basically, we're going to institute a rule that if you're using circular argument, we're not going to let it go on forever because, frankly, these things take too long sometimes. So if anyone has any questions, throw them out in the chat. Feel free. Well, that's bad, Sean. If that was happening, then that's unacceptable. I would stay away from it.
All right.
I would also stay away from people who are involved in it. But
we said that we almost about 10 more minutes, I guess.
Yeah. So let's see here. Past that, there was some interesting discussion in the war room earlier about the councils of Arminium and Seleucia. It's run by this contramodalism guy who's he's written some interesting things in the past, but it says he's a homoian. And that's
that's an Arian. That's like an Arian heretic,
right? And that's why he's condemning the Council of Nicaea and trying to push up the councils of Arminium and Seleucia because those councils were pro-Arian councils in the attempt to try to get all the Orthodox to simply agree with the Arians, and so that's why those councils are not in any way, shape, or form Orthodox. They're not acceptable. And frankly, if this contramodalism guy really is, in fact, an Arian, and it sounds like he is, that makes a lot of the stuff he's writing suspect. And you have to be kind of careful and take it with a grain of salt. Mm-hmm. Let's see here. So, basically, if we're not getting more commentary or people who want to join on in the next couple of minutes, we're going to probably close down a little early. We did do a show for 2.5 hours yesterday, and so we're not doing that anytime soon. Well, it was actually 3 hours almost. But in any case, we are willing to talk to basically any heterodox person who wants to challenge or learn more about Orthodoxy. Ideally, challenge, because really learn more about Orthodoxy. There are forums for that sort of thing.
Now, I should note the Council of the Fifth Ecumenical Council stated that, according to their sources, Ibis had in fact denied the authenticity of the so-called letter to Maris the Persian. And in fact, if you look at the Acts of the Fifth Council, they say the epistle said to have been written by Ibis, the supposed epistle, etc., etc. So I'm not seeing anywhere where Chalcedon endorses the epistle of Ibis the Persian. They're claiming that Ibis was rehabilitated, that this meant Chalcedon approved the epistle supposedly written by him to Maris the Persian. But due to the fact that Ibis had to himself condemn anything he had written against St. Cyril, just like Blessed St. Theodora had, maybe not, because they had done that, Chalcedon rehabilitated him. However, the anti-Chalcedonian view is that this is St. Leo, St. Anatolius, and the others were basically behaving in very wicked manners, and they were basically lying about everything. And they were teaching crypto-Nestorianism.
Okay, now, Sean sent me something in the in Facebook chat where it sounds like a description of a Greek parish, Greek Archdiocese parish, which says it's very pan-Orthodox in nature. Now, that could really be interpreted, especially when you're dealing with Greek churches, in two different ways, because many Greek churches are largely made up of ethnic Greeks and immigrants. That's not common anymore, and so generally they say pan-Orthodox to indicate that whatever kind of Orthodox you are, that you're welcome to go there. Unfortunately, I mean, I have seen in some cases in World Orthodoxy in the U.S. where basically they do extend that to non-Chalcedonians. I don't think that's right. I don't know that that's what it means in this particular case. You'd have to ask the priest, and if he confirms that, then you have an issue. But otherwise, this was the old priest, he communed cops, etc. Okay, so yeah, that's bad. That's
well. Remember, the problem is that some of these official patriarchates, like Alexander and Antioch, they have communion agreements with the Syro-Jacobites and the Coptic patriarchs.
Yeah, no, I know, and
that's something that we as traditional Orthodox do not accept.
Yeah, you know? And so no, you're not Divine Aegis. You're not derailing the topic.
I mean, well, at least somebody came. I mean, I'm actually happy.
Yeah, we're actually impressed that you showed up. To be quite honest, because we've been dealing with people for over a week. And frankly, they keep saying things to the effect of, "Why can't you just treat us as brothers?" And then turn around and say something like, "But we don't accept Chalcedon, and you shouldn't either." The point is that's double-tongued speaking. It is, you're speaking out of both sides of your mouth, and you're not being honest. I'm not saying you. I'm saying the people who are doing this, and that's part of the reason why the fact that you'd come out and defend your position, we respect that. No matter what religious background you come from, we respect that. But we're going to try to answer, and we're going to answer. It's what we do. So please, you didn't derail any topic. This is literally what we do every show. So
okay, so he says we do not accept Chalcedon, but not because of the theology. Well, Divine Aegis, the problem I have with that is if you look at the historical sources, like Severus, like Timothy Alarus, the cat. They condemn Chalcedon as basically Nestorian in nature. These were the great teachers of the anti-Chalcedonian Coptic Patriarchate in the late 400s and 500. And Severus was accepted by the Coptic Patriarchate, even though he was in Syria. Sure. So they explicitly attacked Chalcedon as heretical and Nestorian, and they said his theology was faulty and wrong. In fact, if you look at the letters of Severus, you can find them on that Tertullian.org site on the Additional Fathers section. Severus tears apart Chalcedon as Nestorian and heretical. He says there were many Nestorians, and that's what we're disputing. There were repentant Nestorians, people who had repented of their error, all right? But Severus didn't accept that. Severus didn't accept the definition. He said the council was heretical. He didn't accept it at all. But modern Copts are saying, well, they accept, they don't attack the theology, but that's traditionally not, I'm saying that's traditionally not what the Coptic figures up to the 19th century would have said.
I pointed in a discussion to a certain abbot that's in the calendar. And we may as well include Severus in this as well, because if I remember correctly, he's considered a saint in your church. But the point is, if these people define the doctrine of your church, it's wrong to throw them under the bus. At least, unless you consider them wrong, which if you consider them wrong, you should just join us. But if you don't consider them wrong, then it's wrong to, try to sweep them under the rug. It's not right.
He says, David Shield says, isn't the problem that Pope St. Leo's letter can be read through a Nestorian view as well as the Orthodox view? I'd say no. The problem is that you can take any Orthodox text and you can pervert it to mean whatever you want to mean. That's true. People can take yesterday. People can take this, exactly. People can take the scriptures, the fathers, and they can misinterpret them, and that's why you have additional councils, to say things. Divine Aegis says the theology is bad without the Fifth Council. So how is it bad? What is true is that without condemning Chalcedon, we held another council in the 550s to make explicit what we were teaching. All right, that didn't mean we rejected Chalcedon or we attacked it, because again, they never accede, and they never. Where in Chalcedon do they say something like, "Oh, the letter of Ibis teaches orthodoxy and it's the dogma of the church," or something like that? As far as I understand, they don't do that. So, and remember, when we held the Fifth Council, okay, because no father has said Christ is in two natures. Well, doesn't Saint what does Saint Cyril say in his letter to John of Antioch? Well, we regard Pope Saint Leo as a father.
Yeah, we don't consider him mistaken, and he did say that. So,
okay, here's the point. Let me look at it. Okay. Natures. There is a union of two natures, to the two natures, according to nature, his natures of his natures.
Well, he's saying it never says in two natures ever, so you may as well link it because he's clearly saying that.
Well, it says, for we know the theologians make some things of the evangelical and apostolic teaching about the Lord common as pertaining to the one person. The other things they divide as to the two natures and attribute the worthy ones to God on account of the divinity, and the lowly ones on account of his humanity. Okay, now, do you understand that Severus attacked St. Cyril for saying this, talking about two natures? I can actually find where Severus severely attacks Cyril and says he was wrong to even do this. Okay. Severus of Antioch, letters. Let's see here. Okay. I think somebody already posted some of it up on the war zone.
Yeah, but so I think that answers that. I don't know who's a sophist.
I think he's saying it's sophistry to trying to defend the anti-Chalcedonian position.
I would agree with him, but when you definitely maybe make it a little longer, the sentence, because I didn't know what that was about. But in any case. All right, so okay, from two parents means my being is from two people. If I say I am in two parents, means I'm divided into two. It's not that you can't use that analogy. It's
okay. Well, my question, Aegis, is you think our terms are not orthodox? You're saying they're not from the fathers and they're not orthodox. Well, the problem is that. What does he say? Does he say Saint Cyril made mistakes in his formula? Does he say any? Does he have any criticism of Saint Cyril? Saint Cyril.
Okay, we're just waiting for an answer.
Because
if others have questions, don't hesitate. It's fine.
Well, it's kind of what time is it right now, Father?
It's 9:07. I guess we can go for the other 20 minutes, but for the full hour, it's fine.
Okay.
Let me see here.
Okay, so they say they're not going to do anything. In other words, they're stating their position, but they're not willing to debate it. And they're saying we're doing the wrong thing by stating our position and not accepting theirs. See, this is the problem when you debate Coptic Severians or whatever, and Nestorians. They always say, no, everybody misunderstood us, until it comes to someone else saying someone misunderstood them, like when Pope Shenouda condemned the Nestorians. And the Nestorians said, we're not Nestorian. And he refused to accept it.
Well, I mean, I hate to say that, but the Arians do the same thing. Mm-hmm. St. Severus never condemned St. Cyril. Well, he did criticize him, so that's incorrect. St. Dioscorus never accepted in two natures. Well, we just say Dioscorus. We don't consider him a saint. He said, I accept from two natures, but not in two natures, because that's what the fathers taught, and my soul is at stake. Is this Dioscorus the one from the Robber Council?
Yeah, apparently. Yeah. Okay, so if your soul is at stake, Divine Aegis, when you teach, when you say that you're saying your soul is at stake unless you accept Dioscorus' teachings, then is not our soul at stake if we reject Dioscorus' formulations and teachings? You see, then you're having to reject the whole ecumenical view which we're propounding, And that's what we're trying to get at. You have to simply defend your position and don't try to have all this nonsense about we're supposedly brothers.
Yeah, because we're not. And that's okay.
Because if Dioscorus said his soul was at stake if he accepted Chalcedon, then that's an admission that there was a fundamental difference between the fathers of Chalcedon and okay, so I understand, but if Dioscorus said his soul was at stake if he accepted Chalcedon and its formulations and teachings, then I hate to say it, but he's basically attacking the fathers of Chalcedon as being heretics. And then the conclusion is what? If you accept Chalcedon, you're accepting a council of heretics.
Right, and that's exactly why you can't say you just accept Chalcedon. What was it? I'm trying to find where. Let me see. I'm trying to find the other person in their calendar, and he very explicitly says anyone who accepts the Tome of Leo is anathematized and is a heretic. And if you believe that, then you can't believe that Chalcedon is acceptable. You just can't. There's no way around that. So the point is,
Excuse me.
you have to kind of the point is viewing things honestly is the key here. And a lot of the discussions that we're having on the war zone, we don't know if you're on the war zone or not, seem to be based around downplaying the very things we're talking about. So you can't have it both ways. You can't have it like where you're like, okay, well, Chalcedon is right in practice and theory, and then just flat out say it's wrong. Well, you say we can accept Chalcedon as long as you don't mean mixture, alteration, division in Christ. Well, if you're saying effectively that it is one nature, then yeah, you're not actually accepting Chalcedon. So the point is, we would say that you probably can't accept Chalcedon, but you should because you're still wrong. And the problem is it has condemned our saints for rejecting an unorthodox ground. Well, so far I've seen that the main saint that's being used is St. Kirill. And again, St. Kirill does use that language. Father Enoch put up a link to it. So the point is, where do we get to the point where we say, okay, St. Kirill actually said that? Because we did this absolute no father of the church thing yesterday with a Roman Catholic who literally produced no saints that said anything to the effect of what you're saying. We seem to be having this redux again. So no, if the main person we've seen argued here is St. Kirill, and if we're pointing out St. Kirill used the term two natures, then he did use the term two natures. That's it. You could argue that it's a forgery, but I don't think you'd be very successful with
that. Excuse me. Okay.
You can just scroll right up to the links at early church texts, and you can find it right there. We put the link right in the chat.
Do you see it?
Huh?
Do you see it? Do you see the text?
Yeah, I put it out. I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, and so.
Okay.
Well, for renowned theologians make some things of the evangelical and apostolic teaching about the Lord common as pertaining to the one person, and the other things they divide as to the two natures, and attribute the worthy ones to God on account of the divinity of Christ, and the lowly ones to account on his humanity. I mean, he literally uses the term two natures. So,
I think they're saying there's a difference between of and in.
Well, he's trying to say that we're dividing Christ into two people, which we're not. We believe that there's two natures in one divine person. So the point is, it's like, I mean, you want to say we're Nestorians. We're not. None of us taught what Nestorius taught. But we can point to the saints you say supposedly say things and point to how their terminology is not nearly as clear-cut as you're implying. We've been doing this a lot on the war zone, but then everyone switches into a whole. They switch into a whole. But aren't we supposed to be brothers and so on and so forth? And it's not a very good argument. So the point is, I at least divine ages for all we disagree with you. We respect at least your consistency. Well, except for the fact that you said we accept Chalcedon and we don't. Okay. We already believe Christ has two natures, but you're saying in two natures you're implying division. Well, why is that? If you're believing Christ has two natures, how does that say that you're not implying division? Why is it that when we say two natures, it means that we're Diophysite, but when you say two natures, it means that you're Orthodox and we're not? It makes no sense because we're using the exact same terms. Well, thank you for your permission, but we never thought that that Christ was divided. That's Nestorianism. But more importantly, we said that repeatedly, and I hate to say it, your fathers didn't care. So the point is, we've tried to make it work, despite the fact that, I'm saying that, but the key here is that you're saying Christ is from two natures. But the key is every time I've seen some things in your liturgical text that were argued in the other things, it says, then they are united into one, as in one nature. We believe he's one person. Now, you could reduce the concept of that one nature to something akin to a hypostatic union, but that's not really what's done. Marco Kalabic says, I'm currently doing an undergrad in a very demanding program, 70 hours a week. What books do you recommend to a beginner who doesn't want to get bogged down in heavy theology, at least at first? I would say probably, I'd start with the works of St. John of Damascus. I'd start with, St. Hilary of Poitiers on the faith of the Easterns. I'd start with, basic didactic texts, or you could even just start with the Orthodox Catechism. The early Orthodox Catechism that was published in English. We've published it before. I can actually put a link to it.
Posted a link to St. Cyril's letter 53 to Pope St. Celestine, and he says, the following. He says, Christ is one in both natures and from both natures. If you go to the link, he says, Cyril to Sixtus, not Celestine, Sixtus, the Bishop of Rome. For I never am accused of having thought anything different from the truth of my opinions, nor have I ever said the divine nature of the Word was subject to suffering. I know that the nature of God is impassible, unchangeable, and immutable, even though by the nature of his humanity, Christ is one in both natures and from both natures. So St. Cyril was perfectly fine using in two natures, in both natures, and from both natures.
For Marco, by the way, before we go I want to answer him fully. I'm including a link to the Orthodox Confession of the Catholic Apostolic Eastern Church. It's a short read. It's deep, but it's not long. You can actually download the book online, not from that link, but you can look it up in archive. Archive.org. But if you want a book copy, you can use that one. Okay, sorry I interrupted. Continue on.
Oh, no. I think that's good.
Well, no, but you were talking about something before I interrupted.
No, I was saying that St. Cyril was perfectly all right using in both natures and of both natures. He considered them to be the same. He had no problem using. The Monophysite, the Copts say that St. Cyril didn't say in both natures, but he did. If you look to the link, it's in letter 53. So I don't see what the big issue is. St. Cyril saw no problem with it. So
okay, Divine Ages. If you're looking for the letter, just scroll up a bit, switch it to live chat if it's on Top Chat, and you'll be able to see that Father Enoch has put a link from Google Books, which includes letter 53 of St. Cyril.
Here's the link to the Catechism for Marco.
Okay, this is the link to the online link. If you look, it's
and I'm going to post again the letter. So here it is. Here's the letter.
Yeah,
letter 53.
You label it for
Yep. Letter 53, St. Cyril.
Okay. We were going for a much more low stress show today, so this one I think worked out pretty well.
Okay. Well, not much more to say. All right, let's close everything down. You think, Father?
Yeah. I think if there's are there any other questions for anyone who has a question? If not, then...
Oh, by the way, today was commemorated Saint Emerentiana, the Virgin Martyr.
Tell us a little more about that.
Well, Saint Emerentiana was a Virgin Martyr in Rome, and shortly after Saint Agnes, the Virgin Martyr, died, Saint Emerenciana, who was only a catechumen, was going to pray at the tomb of Saint Agnes. And as she was praying at the tomb, the various pagans walking by attacked her and accosted her, saying, "Why are you praying at the tomb of a criminal?" And and began to mock her. And Saint Emerenciana defended the Christian faith, even though she wasn't baptized. She was a catechumen. And then they took her, they horrifically tortured her, and she died. But she was accounted a martyr as baptized in her own blood. And that's what the earliest lives of her say. And in fact, in the readings in the martyrologies and in the nocturnes for the midnight office, the matins, they explicitly say she was baptized in her own blood. The Old English martyrology, which represents kind of Anglo-Saxon England in the 9th century, says the same thing. So it's interesting that we had a discussion with someone who denied that right on the eve of the commemoration of her feast, you could say.
Yeah. And so you can say that
the
liturgy itself refutes what James is saying.
Well, and what happens is the Finneites, this is really a Finneyite position, claim that you can't trust any of these legends or lives of the saints.
Well, yeah, but that just makes them renovationists, just like everyone.
Exactly. They throw out the lives of the saints, or they say she had to be baptized because our interpretation overrides what all the lives of the saints and the fathers say about the subject.
Exactly, and then you can add her to the list, like with Saint Alban, who we discussed yesterday.
And remember, the man, the one who was to execute the soldier who took Saint Alban, he was executed too, and he certainly wasn't baptized. He was executed because he refused to attack Saint Alban. All right, so they had to bring in another executioner, as I recall. So there's no claim that Saint Alban was baptized, but certainly this other guy wasn't.
Yeah.
So the idea is that God is the lawgiver, the same God who in the Old Testament decreed death for adultery was the same God who chose not to put the woman caught in adultery to death. Now, was God a liar? Did he break his own commandments when he chose not to do that? No, because the laws God issues are ultimately for the salvation of men. They're for correction. All right. Now, some laws are for there is eternal punishment, obviously. But for example, God commanded the death penalty in the Old Testament for idolatry and for adultery. Yet, why was King David exempted from this? God chose to show mercy on him and on his family. All right. When the nation of Israel apostatized in the ancient times during Isaiah and other prophets committed mass human sacrifice and idolatry, why was not the entire country depopulated with the prophet Isaiah massacring most of the population who apparently had committed a death penalty worthy offenses? It's because God has the authority to remit the stringency of the law without abolishing the actual the moral precept. Because God chose not to execute people for adultery or murder, that does not mean he excuses the crime. Similarly, our God and Lord Jesus Christ, because he chooses by his own divine grace to give that one baptism's grace to people in their martyrdom, that does not mean the baptism of water is abolished. All right, you'd have to argue that God is bound by these. He's not allowed to make any kind of decision that we disagree with. If you know my problem, Father Joseph, with that, that's kind of God, the view that God is bound by some sort of logical laws, and it's like a gotcha religion.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. I actually dealt with that extensively when I'm dealing with Protestant discussions. Okay, so is Berde of a heretic?
Yeah, he is.
He was a universalist.
Yeah, he was one of the early Paris school peoples.
Acclaimed by the modern world because they generally attack everyone.
I think he may have been even into Imaslavy. Don't quote me on that, but I think there were a lot of these Paris exile people got into weird stuff homeless quasi-Kabbalism and all this other stuff. A lot of the St. Vladimir's people promote Berdeyev because he's just a weirdo. I mean, he's heretic weirdo. I don't know why they care. I mean, the problem is that the St. Vladimir's is basically a version of the Paris school transplanted to America. So. Okay, Divine Aegis says the link shows letters 68 to 98. I'm sorry, hold on.
It could be a problem with Google Books, which seems to show selective choices.
Well, how do I take a picture of it?
You'd probably print screen or a screenshot tool of some kind.
I figured it out one time. Hold
on. Let me see.
Okay, I got cancel, charge, portrait, letter. Okay. Okay, hold on. No, I think I know what the problem is. Hold on 1 second. You get the same thing? Hold on 1 second. I think I know what the issue is. Hold on.
No problem.
Okay, so hold on.
What is our opinion on the while you're doing?
Okay, that? So divine ages. Go here. See if that takes you to page 11.
While Father Enoch's working on that, Marco Kalabik asks, "What's your guys' opinion on the toll houses?" I think the toll houses have substantial patristic support. There's no way you can say the fathers don't believe in the concept of the angels and the demons disputing over our souls. I think you can even find in terms of the disputation over the body of the prophet Moses that angels and demons do in fact fight over our souls as we head in one direction or the other. So I think that there's not some people say there are 20 toll houses. There are different enumerations of the toll houses, but the simple reality is the church has always affirmed the reality of toll houses.
Metropolitan Macarius Bulgata, who died in 1881, proposed. He says that it's not necessary to accept it's not necessary to try to harmonize every single different account of how to number the toll houses. Yeah. He says what you have to accept is the basis, which is that angels and demons dispute over the soul after death. Yep. It does. Now, there are numerous mischaracterizations of the Telonia, which state that the demons can lie and the angels can't do anything about it, and they can just lie about everything and seize your soul, and too bad. All right? The demons can lie, but they're lying. God's not going to allow a bunch of demons to lie about somebody and
accidentally take your soul to hell. If your soul is going to hell, guess what? That's how it's going down.
Exactly. So I think people like Lazar Pahalo and some of the Hakna people.
We believe that. That's fine. We agree.
I think they create they have mischaracterized the Chelonians so bad over 35, 40 years that it's no wonder that when people are confronted with it and they say, well, I can't believe that demons can just basically take anybody's soul without, with lying. And I say, well, that's not the teaching. And I explain it. And then I had one person say, well, that makes much more sense.
Yeah.
Because if you're mischaracterizing the Telonia teaching to be like, well, the demons can do whatever they want and the angels just
going to throw up their hands. Power to the demons that they don't have.
Exactly. So.
All right. Are there any other questions? Let's see. I don't see any questions left. So, but
now it was interesting because to bring this up, but I don't know if the Divine Aegis knows this, but I believe the Coptic Patriarchate on Pentecost Vespers actually altered one of the traditional prayers of Saint Basil because I'll post it on the group if you're there, because in this traditional one of the kneeling prayers, which was not just in the Byzantine Rite, but was accepted apparently in the Alexandrian Rite as well, it talks about praying for the souls in Hades. All right? And the Coptic Church actually altered it, or I can't remember if they removed it or they altered it because they assumed that was praying for people in damnation. All right? Whereas what St. Basil was talking about was praying for the souls of the departed Orthodox who temporarily go to the upper levels of Hades. And then where they are purified through the divine compassion, not through any purgatorial fire and temporal satisfaction and such. So, it's not that's an issue where if you're going to go changing prayers, that to me would seem to be problematic. But no. Okay. I understand that, but I'm saying is that there was an overreaction if you actually look at the situation where they misunderstood what St. Basil was talking about in the prayer, and they concluded that it's just better to scrap the whole prayer than just to teach correctly about it. So,
okay, hold on 1 second, Father, because he's still having a problem with the link. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to...
Can you see what I'm talking about, Father? Can you see the
I can, and I've already screenshotted it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just looking for a quick image host. Probably post image would work fine. Choose image. Give me 1 second. Okay. And okay. I'll block that. Okay, and here you go. All right, so I'm posting a link to the image just to, and that it's letter 53. If you look, that's the text that was on the page. And so, once again,
what did you post the link at?
I posted the link from post image.
Okay.
So it's actually it's
letter 53 of Saint Cyril, which you wrote to Pope Saint Sixtus of Rome.
Right, and so the point is, I did post the image, so it's there. So it's letter 53 to Saint Sixtus. Yeah, please write down more questions if you feel like it. I think we will have, maybe one show tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going on the Matt Slick show. I may take this week off, because of the whole controversy about putting it up and not putting it up, and then finally it was up. So we'll see. Plus, on top of that, we do have other things to do besides this. So
yeah, we finally got the plumbing fit. I mean, one of the pipes busted because it was so cold. The water pipe. So we were down there having to fix it in the basement.
All right. So in that case, we're going to say thanks to everyone for listening. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your arguments. And everybody, have a great night. Father, benedicite.
Benedicite.